welcome and thanks everyone for joining. It's really exciting for our first edition film festival and our first Q&A. Today's documentary, so I've got two filmmakers here from the documentary strand. I'm Kat Morrison. I'm an MA film student from the university. And today we have Sorina, who directed and produced Then I Met Erich, and Gordon, who produced and directed Rainpot. So if you've not had a chance to view them yet, you know, this is a good time. You're going to learn a bit more about the films before you actually see them. But if you've watched them, then, you know, you're going to learn more about something you've already seen. So thank you guys so much for coming, Sorina and Gordon. I'm going to ask an open question first for both of you. We'll start with Sorina. Could you tell me a bit about your film and the context you made it in terms of country and the school that you're from?
So, And Then I Met Erich was my first film that I made at the National Film and Television School. It was quite a quick project. So I think we had £200 budget and 2 weeks of shooting, or less even. So it's a quite spontaneous, quick movie, a very honest movie in that sense. And I made it in Romania because my family, they are Transylvanian Saxons. So I was born and raised in Germany, but they're coming from Transylvania, from Copșa Mică. So it was kind of like me going back and seeing what they left behind.
Thank you. It's really, really great to see, you know, somewhere else in the world where, you know, we would never get to normally go. Same for you, Gordon. Could you tell us a bit about your film and what country you're from and what school you're at as well?
Absolutely. I made Rainpot as my thesis film from Rhode Island School of Design in the United States. And I was in a program between Rhode Island School of Design and Brown University right next to it, studying art history. So I think this film kind of emerged from a combination of my studies that year, which were in East Asian ceramics when I was at Brown, and then studying animation and ceramics simultaneously at RISD. And so this was an 8-month project where all these classes kind of fed in and created, you know, the film. And then also in the end, we left school because of the pandemic. So the last shooting of the film was actually done at my home on Martha's Vineyard. And so the landscapes that actually inspired the film throughout when I was making it were able to be included in the film at the end.
Oh, that's great. It really seems like a really personal project as well. Because there's only two of you guys today, it means we can, you know, ask a bit more specific questions about the film. So I'm going to start with Sorina, and then I met Erich to go through some questions. So the main question for me, because I love the film so much, was how did you meet Erich?
Yeah, by chance, really. So I went to Copșa Mică. As I said, it was quite a spontaneous film, and it had to happen really quick. So I just went to Copșa Mică saying, okay, I just see whatever I find, right? And like, just discover basically the village. And well, I can't speak Romanian, unfortunately, just a little bit. I'm learning it at the moment. So the best way for me was actually to search for Transylvanian Saxon, no? Because they speak German. And I asked the friend of my mother who still lives there, so I stayed at his house, if there's any Transylvanian Saxons left. And he said, yeah, there's one guy, you know, like Erich, but I don't know, like he's never at home, you know, he's always in the woods, and you can just have a check. And I went there like one day, I couldn't find him, and like the second, third, I think, and I got a little bit panicked. I was like, okay, just filming around, but not having really anyone. And I love just character-driven stories, so I was really on the hunt for a character or like a contributor. And then one day I was just, you know, I just said, okay, I'm just sitting in his garden. I just went into his garden and just sat there for hours and hours. And then all of a sudden, Erich came in with his cowboy hat on and a hat on his back. And I was like, this is my guy. Like, you know, like it was just immediate click that I wanna find out more about who he is and what he does. And obviously, like, you know, the Saxons were like quite a small community, so there is a lot of similarities in between his family and mine. He obviously said immediately that he's my uncle, which he, spoiler alert, isn't. But so yeah, it was just about finding, out of need, really finding someone that I communicate with, and then it just happened to be Erich, and then we just went kind of like on a little road trip together. Yeah, so that's how I met him.
That's so funny and so charming. He's such a brilliant, I can say, character, because obviously it's a documentary, but in himself he was a character. How did, you know, there's quite a few other characters in the world. Is it his nephew? He was brilliant as well.
Maria.
On to the filmmaking process, how did they play along with it? Were they a bit reluctant at first? How did they respond to it?
Well, Erich wasn't amused at the beginning. But he kind of went with it. Now, like, he was just like, stop filming. But then he actually, you know, he got quite attached quite quick, and he really enjoyed us being together and just sharing these moments, and me telling him about my life and him about his. So like he really enjoyed company, and I enjoyed his company as well. So then, you know, he was actually like, when I didn't come to film, then he picked me up so we can film together again. So yeah, he was a little bit suspicious at the beginning, like, why would you want to film? But then he understood, and then it was just like a little bit of a friendship going on. Yeah.
Oh, that's really, really sweet. Also, the story that your film is about, it seemed quite personal. You went there for a reason, to discover your family, a bit more about history. How was it creating a film that was so personal to you?
I mean, the underlying topic, which doesn't really shine through, which I'm not making a lot of topic out of it, but I think you can sense it a little bit, is obviously a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, a lot of injustice that happened to these people and that they carry with them. And so did my family. I mean, there's a lot of addiction, a lot of depression in my family, and I struggled a lot with that, you know, with the aftermath of something that obviously is not just the village to blame for, but it is also, I mean, my family never really like talked about the past much. I mean, I grew up only with my mom, and it was, you know, quite hard for her growing up there and being in this environment, and there was never much talk about it. So I actually, whilst I was researching her hometown, only then I found out that it was the most polluted village, or like the most polluted place in Europe for a while. And I saw videos and I was like, what? Like, it was all black. You couldn't put like clothes outside. Like, there was no grass. And I was just like, what? Why don't I know about it? Why would my mom never talk about this? And it's really just like, you know, it happens often that people, when they move to another place, it's just kind of like, okay, let's forget about this and let's look into the future and not so much into the past. So for me, it was kind of like, oh, okay, that's why. A lot of things made sense all of a sudden, and I could empathize a lot more with the struggles of my family, whereas before it was maybe a little bit more anger, you know, a lot of anger towards my father and his addiction and his abuse, and like, but then kind of like, yeah, it was kind of coming to peace a little bit with things, you know. So yeah, it was quite hard as well, obviously, for me, going to confronting all of these emotions. But at the same time, I wanted to keep it more as like, you know, a gentle ride and through the lens of somebody else, which is Erich. I think if I would have made it too personal about my mom or my dad or my grandma, it would be maybe a little bit too much. But it was through Erich, so it kind of like was the buffer in between, which actually helped me quite a bit to come to terms with a lot of things.
That's really, really heartwarming to know that, you know, there were struggles, but it, you know, something positive came from it. In terms of when you were planning the filming and planning to go there, did you have any thoughts of, oh, maybe I might meet a family member, I'll put into brackets, a family member or someone that could tell you about the factory and things like that? Or was it kind of a surprise when you got there? I know you said that you only met Erich because he was the only person that could speak German to you, but when you went there, was there a plan to meet someone who knew about your family and knew about the story you wanted to create?
Yeah, I mean, I met with like a couple of people before. I met with a doctor who just had, you know, like a lot of notes, obviously, about hard facts of how many people died, how many people actually got lead poisoning. But I just quickly realized that that's not really what how I wanna frame it, because it just got too heavy, and also it had to happen quite quick. So, you know, I couldn't put too much effort in really getting all the facts right and like finding a lot of contributors. And as I said, like I didn't really want to make it through my own family, like my mother or grandmother, as that was a little bit too close, and our relationship is also a little bit fragile at times. So yeah, I had a plan of like really understanding how it all actually was and how damaging it actually was for people. But as I said, like it became, once I met Erich, it just became clear that I also just want to enjoy the ride and just, you know, go without too much plan into a day and see what happens, see who I meet, see how he spends his days, and yeah, just understand how it has been for him, because he has lost his wife, right, because of the factory. He has, you know, addiction problems. So yeah, it became clear that he's the guy. He's my guy to help me tell the story better.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the story that at the beginning you explained, it was, you know, a heavy topic, but as it went on, I think using Erich as the tool to tell the story was really nice, because it took it away from the harshness as well.
Yeah.
During the filming or after the film, you know, creating this film, did you learn anything about yourself or about your filmmaking process? Like you said, going with the flow, was that something you usually didn't do, or what did you learn from making this film?
I mean, that's normally what before that was, as I said, it was my first film at the NFTS, and the NFTS is quite you know, they emphasize storytelling a lot, and obviously they want us to plan everything out and each scene, and you know, but as it was still a very early project, I still went with my guts. Now I normally just go somewhere, and I think the most joy I have in really finding people, and it's also something that comes much more easy to me than actually planning things out. I do that much more now, after having studied at the NFTS, which obviously helps a lot and has a lot of benefits. But I think, you know, what it taught me is that, I don't know, sometimes it's okay to not have much plan, but an instinct, right? My mentor would probably kill me saying that, because that was like his biggest challenge, to get me away from that kind of thinking. But for me, it really is about, it was an impulse. I want to see what they left behind, and I don't know what I'm gonna film, but you know, sometimes it's okay if you just want to discover something for yourself. As it was so personal, it was much more important to, not really the end product, right, or like the end film. It was more about the journey and about the ride. And yeah, if you have a feeling that you want to discover something, I think you can be pretty sure that you will find something, right? And even if it's finding nothing, then that's already having, you know, like there will be an outcome if you're really passionate and curious about something. I think you don't have to worry too much if you don't have everything on paper yet, because you might just have meet someone just like that, and then it changes everything. So I think like staying with my instincts and just trusting myself, and enjoying the ride is something that I took away from this film. Because now you can, like, other films might be much better in the storytelling, which came after, but might have lost a little bit of this, you know, in the moment charm, and like this, everything is a little bit chaotic and the camera is held a little bit bad, but it doesn't really matter because that's part of it.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Sometimes over preparation is a negative thing, and you know, you found a hidden treasure of Erich. Thank you so much. We're going to go over to Gordon now, who created Rain Pot, which shows some lovely pots behind him. Thank you so much for joining.
Can I ask one question for Sorina?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, I really enjoyed your film, and you know, I loved how the character Erich, he's kind of constantly on the edge of very loving, but kind of very rough in a way, like the way he treats people and the way he treats animals.
Yeah.
Like the cat and the rabbit. You know, some of those were a little hard to watch, but I think they're important for the story. And I was wondering, I noticed like you weren't the editor of the film. If you had been the editor, do you think it would have ended up being a different film, or you might have had a hesitancy to include moments like that after having this like personal connection with Erich?
I mean, yeah, it without a doubt it would have been a very different film, and I just had the most amazing editor, Raluca Petre. She is actually she's from Bucharest, so she was the perfect editor for me because she could understand all the bits that I couldn't, you know, all the Romanian bits. I found out a lot of stuff that Erich actually talked about me through her, you know, which I was like, what? He said what? It was quite funny. We had a lot of, yeah, I mean, she's absolutely genius. And it was the first time that I worked with an editor, so it was such a hard process for me to understand what my relation in all of this is. And, you know, it should be mine, but then obviously I need someone to help me to actually get the distance right. So yeah, I think, I don't know exactly how it would have ended up when I would have edited it, but definitely not as good, for sure not. Far from that. It would have been probably a bit more about, I don't know, like maybe more about really like my own family and, you know, all the poison, and maybe I would have gone too much into like my own family history. But through her, I had the right distance, and she actually, you know, found the story with the animals and the connections and really made that work. So it was my first time actually working in a team, and with a composer and a sound designer, and like everybody contributed so much for me getting a little bit away from it, stepping away from it and seeing the whole picture, which was very helpful. Yeah, I think I would have very much struggled, or maybe not even finished the film, you know, because it is so personal. And maybe I would have said, oh God, you know, like, because Erich is a rough character and there were a lot of scenes which weren't as nice, you know, like, but, you know, maybe I would have even included more often of the scenes that are not as charming, you know, because it is such a hurtful space for me. So I'm really glad that I had a team around me who helped me finish something that might have been quite a hard thing to do by myself. Yeah.
It was a great question, Gordon. I think having someone else tell your story in a way it takes you out of it and makes your, you know, doesn't put your emotions in it too much, which is kind of rewarding, and as you said, can change the story. So a really good question. But on to you, Gordon. Could you tell me a bit about your pottery and the process? I'm really interested in the process of making these and the animated pots. Can you tell me about that process?
Right. I mean, it's really it looks more complicated than it is. I mean, essentially it's no different than doing you know, cell animation, or where you're animating frame by frame in a row, but rather those frames are marked out in intervals on this pot. But I mean, when I'm working on a potter's wheel, you know, it's like this symmetrical object spinning around, which is the same as a zoetrope. So I think like connecting the two is a pretty, you know, uh, pretty direct step.
Yeah, they're really beautiful, and the imagery and the sound as well, it all just really work together. I was wondering what your inspirations were for the visuals, the sounds, like what inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of the visuals when I first started the project, uh, I guess like the technique of just animating on these pots was what was most interesting to me. So the actual visuals that I was including, I wasn't thinking a lot about, um, which maybe is for the best because I mean, this idea of like birds and fish and water, those are all subjects that are very like personal to me and close to home for me. So I guess when I'm like not thinking about what the subject is, then that's what kind of comes out. And I think that's, you know, closer to me as an artist. Um, but yeah, when I started the project, I mean, I was just kind of entranced by just these animating textures that were on the pots. And like the first iterations within the film were just of textures. Like I think one section of the film is just textures being animated. And those are actually textures that I had had on my functional pottery for years, you know, before making the film. And then it was actually an act of discovering that they also had this life to them when put in front of a camera and filmed in a certain way. So that was kind of the starting point. And within those, without any intention, I kind of saw this like moving grass or water or flocks of birds. Uh, and then that was kind of the stepping stone.
Yeah, there's some beautiful imagery, and when I was watching it, there's a hard to see, is it real or is it animation? It just looks so um confusing in a way, like it looks so
Right.
real but yet so animated. It was really, really lovely. And how did you achieve these animations, and did you face any challenges, you know, making it?
Yeah, I mean, there were like the whole process of making the film, and this was also talking about editing. This made editing really tough. Like, since I had never done this technique before starting the film, like every new scene I would make, I would learn something new and discover something that I would then want to, you know, dig a little deeper into. So all of these challenges that came up about yeah, like getting everything synced up correctly, and then also a lot of camera issues. I mean, when I left school, I also lost access to like all the fancy camera gear. So I really shot most of the film on just like a little DSLR that I grew up with in like $100 lens, um, which caused a lot of difficulties. But yeah, like the whole process was hitting challenges and figuring out how to, I mean, the more some of the more complicated vessels, I had actually designed the animation on the computer, uh, and then had to figure out a way to register it onto a pot and then uh, you know, translate it into some sort of inlaid design on a pot or something like that. So I think one of the biggest problems I was having was how to accurately register it onto a maybe not so perfectly symmetrical pot and how to get it to work.
Yeah, it seemed like a really complex process, but it was completely, you know, the reward was amazing. And was there any, obviously because it is a documentary but also an animation hybrid kind of piece, what were your reasons for more of an artistic approach opposed to, say, a talking head narrator approach explaining, you know, the pottery? What was your reasoning for the more artistic style?
Yeah, well, I think you know, when I was thinking about the piece and kind of the reasons for going into it, I wasn't really thinking of making a film or a documentary, but rather one kind of art piece. I don't know. I had been like studying art history at Brown and then animation at RISD. And all of these classes I was in, especially when you get to like the pandemic, but like all the work we're seeing was on a screen. And then obviously like filmmaking, you know, everything is translated onto a screen. Like you have like a stop motion set, for example, or like, you know, a character like Erich, and it's all about choosing how you want to, you know, show that character and the context and how you want to shoot that stop motion set to take this like real object, but then make it this like expansive landscape on a screen. And then, you know, it wasn't so different with all the pieces I was studying in art history. You know, like my main exposure to the pieces was through a computer screen or like a one image on a textbook. But then parallel to my studies, I had been making functional pottery since high school, which very much is about the day-to-day use over time, you know, not just like one picture. So I think I was seeing this kind of disparity between how we were documenting pottery and then how we're actually like experiencing pottery. So I think part of the goal of the project was actually to think about, well, what does like a ceramic vessel look like when it's made intentionally to live online? And I had been, you know, in contact with this writer named Glenn Adamson, who wrote about this idea of a hyperpot, which is like a new piece of pottery that lives specifically on Instagram. And it's kind of designed to be very like bold and colorful and, you know, perform really well as one image. So I wanted to make like a different version of a hyperpot, but rather one that was, you know, could be more subtle and quiet, but still exist well online and have this kind of dynamic life and change that, I don't know, a simple quiet pot might have. But over years of using it and attaching it to memories, and I don't know. So that was a lot of the goal of the project, was thinking about how I could document a piece of pottery, but in an accurate way.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how blurred the lines are between, you know, film and art. And it's, you know, this piece was really a combination of the two, more than just a documentary about something. It was more of an art piece, which was really beautiful to watch. We've got some questions. I think I'm going to throw over to Lydia to read the questions out from the audience.
Thank you very much, Kat. I think I might start with the last one, which is about Gordon, since we are talking about his spots, and then go back to Erich. Erich, I think, is a bit of a star anyway, so people want to ask questions. So yeah, I mean, the question I have here is quite general, but things about you giving some background is from Kieran Wainwright, one of our MA students. It says, hey, Gordon, what made you choose to document pottery? I think you sort of explained it, but if you can say a bit more about it.
But yeah, I mean, pottery was a medium I had been working in since high school. And my mom is actually a potter, so I was kind of living around it, and didn't really study it a lot in school. When I was in college, I was spending my classes in other mediums, but it was kind of always on the side of my college career, and like a job I would have in the summers was like throwing pottery. And then like my last year of school, while I was working on this thesis, I managed to get into a ceramic sculpture class. And so I think part of this project was also a way to kind of like triple dip all my responsibilities my last year of school. So I kind of combined like my sculptural ceramic class and a art history class on like the history of portraiture, and also my animation thesis. I combined into one project as a way to make like the working more efficient and be able to spend more time on one project. So I think it originally came out of trying to make a ceramic sculpture, but like a new take on it.
Thank you, Gordon. I will actually go back and forth now. I'll ask some questions for Sorina, and we get back to Gordon, questions about his film. Yeah, I think the first question I have for you, Sorina, is about whether you managed to stay in touch with Erich still. Now you finished his film. This is from
yeah. He calls me on a regular basis. Yeah.
So he has become family, whether he was or not.
Yes,
like
yeah, he is now definitely my uncle for sure. Yeah, no, we stay, like, he has my number. He doesn't have a phone, so I can't contact him, but he always finds someone of his friends where he then just, yeah, calls me at times. And I actually have been back to Romania once as well, to Kopša Mica, just for, you know, for a visit, because I was researching for another project before COVID happened. I wanted to make my graduation project in Romania. So I went back and actually stayed there for a while, and we just hanged out and, yeah, went to places. And
Do you think, this is my question following up on this actually, do you think you're going to follow up anything with him, or that's it?
With him, I don't know. With him, I mean, he's a great guy, right? But I'm not sure. Maybe as part of something different. I actually wanted to make a film about another village, Gemana, which is like, you know, has kind of like also Ceausescu crimes.
Right.
And yeah, so I definitely think I will go back to Romania and make more projects there, hopefully, once all of this is over. But with Erich, let's see. It would be fun to just film a little bit over years, but there's no rush.
Definitely. I actually have a second question about Erich. As I said, he's a bit of a star. That's from Ruth Doughty. Sorina, were you ever worried when Erich was wielding knives and axes so close to the camera?
Yeah, I was actually worried about the camera, because he would go wild sometimes, and I was just like, this is not my camera. School is gonna kill me. I was more worried about the camera, about myself not. I knew that I was worried about bears though. I was worried about bears and about the camera, because yeah, he took me into the woods, and then he just, like, you know, casually said, oh, there's, you know, the bear mama with 2 babies.
Oh.
And I was just like, that's not good. Like, don't they get really aggressive when they have like babies? And he was like, no, she's my friend. But I was like, oh God, I don't know how much I should trust, like, him being friends with the bear mama. So I was actually worried about my life in the woods, but not from Erich attacking me, but the bear mama attacking me.
Thank you so much. Actually, can I pass on back to Gordon? And I want to ask you about the future and the extent to which you're going to carry on working with films with films about pots. I was going to say, but it's not necessarily about pots, but films and pots, and the idea of basically trying to take further this this process that you actually started working on.
Yeah, I'd say when I first finished the film, I was kind of eager to continue this like exploration and keep on making animated pottery and maybe another documentary about a pottery studio. And I haven't started one yet. You know, it's been over a year now since I graduated, or I guess about 1 year. I've kind of dived into pure like pottery. And part of that, I think, is because making a film is so exhausting. I mean, as I'm sure you all know, it's just like, there's so many parts of it. And then like from the making to like the time behind the computer doing sound design and editing. And, you know, for me, right now, it feels really good just to be making pottery and just to have my hands in clay and the material, and to have the directness of that work. But I certainly do have plans to keep working with the intersection of animation and pottery. I'm just kind of building up some energy to get into another project.
But from what you say, it seems to me that your heart is mostly in the pottery, and that if you're going to make another film, it will be about pots, most likely, or something like that.
It might be. I mean, although, like, I made a lot of other films while I was at school that I never released anywhere, but that were completely different. I mean, I actually got really into like After Effects and like compositing and like hand drawn. And you know, before this last year of making, yeah, I had been making pottery since high school, but I never really was thinking of it as like my career path until this last year when I had this focus on it. But I always planned on painting and drawing. So I think they're all connected, but in the meantime, I'm having a lot of fun just exploring my own technique in ceramic, and
Absolutely.
but I am hoping to make a film again, especially doing film festivals like this, and the connections that films bring you to people all across the world is, I mean, there's just nothing like it.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely. Well, thank you so much for this. I cannot see any other questions from the audience, but I want to ask my own question a little bit to both of you, really. But I will start with Gordon. I wonder whether you have any films that inspired you, basically, and if particularly with Gordon, as the technique is quite similar. Are there any similar films at all? Because in your case, particularly in terms of Sorina, there is a kind of a genre of exploration, so I can see a bit the kind of lineage there. But
Right.
in terms of your film, I can't quite, which I found fascinating. I can't quite think of a similar kind of film. So I wonder whether you have something, or is it very much your own idea, basically?
Yeah, I mean, at least right now, I can't think of any
Yeah.
films that I directly like referenced.
Yeah.
I mean, besides maybe like pottery videos from like the 90s that are like exploring a studio and have kind of this archaic like look. I think like a lot of what I did reference was like poetry or music that I looked into when I was thinking about how I wanted to build a sound design. But I can't think of any films directly off the top of my head that I really used as like an example or followed.
That's fine. How about you, Sorina? Did you have any films in mind, or not really?
For Erich, I didn't really had too many films in mind. So as I said, it was really just more like letting myself do it the way it just happens to happen. No, like also with voiceover was just a necessity in this one because it was so personal, which I haven't continued afterwards. It's like completely out. And putting myself even in front of the camera, like that hasn't happened afterwards either. So it was just kind of like going with the flow. But I mean, like sometimes like I'm inspired by so many people, but I mean, like when we go back, like Grey Gardens, for example, it's just one of the films I love, or Salesman, like the Maisley brothers, and I mean, so many filmmakers that I just absolutely adore. But when it comes to a little bit like characters that are a little bit more exotic in that sense, more outgoing, and then those are the films that definitely have inspired me.
Thank you very much. I do not have any other questions on the chat, but perhaps, I don't know if if somebody wants to say something now from the audience, please do. Otherwise, I'll pass on to Kat anyway. So it doesn't seem to be any urgent question from the audience. So Kat.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Sorina and Gordon for coming and spending some time with us today and giving us a better insight into their films. It was really, really exciting and eye-opening. It was just brilliant. So thank you so much for coming. And thank you to the audience for being here and asking questions and being, participating. And yeah, just to say, you can still join on the website. It's still all open to watch all the films for the rest of the festival. And you can watch, comment, and you can vote as well. We've got an audience award, so get involved that way as well. And yeah, to join us tomorrow for the animation Q&A. And yeah, just thank you so much again for everyone for coming, and to Sorina and Gordon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us. Me.
Thank you.
Thank you
Sorina,
so much.
Gordon, and Kat, and audience, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay.